Prometheus is the much heralded return to a genre that master filmmaker Ridley Scott helped to define with the release of his seminal sci-fi horror Alien over 3 decades ago. And whilst it is indeed a prequel of sorts, it's clear from the first few moments of the film that this is a very different beast indeed. Whereas Alien opened with the isolation, silence and cold of space, Prometheus begins with stunning sweeping vistas and panoramas. Where Alien was a masterclass of subtlety, the power of prolonged silence and measured cutting, Scott's latest outing is a far more visceral, bombastic and even noisy affair. The plot sees scientists Noomi Rapace and Logan Marshall Green head off with a fairly generic ragtag crew in the titular Prometheus spaceship, in hopes of discovering the origins of mankind after finding a series of visual clues left on Earth from numerous different civilisations and times throughout history. It's a simple yet suitably intriguing premise, even if some of Lost co-creator Damon Lindelof's trademark faith versus science dogma is unconvincingly forced in throughout. Amongst the team we have Charlize Theron as a high-strung corporate official representing a company which will be instantly recognisable to fans of the Alien series, Idris Elba as the ship's atypical sardonic captain figure.
Captain, do you think you can put us down there?
Engage landing sequence. Switch to manual.
Commence landing.
Yeah, baby, yeah.
And even an appearance from Guy Pearce as an elderly CEO via some extremely distracting and excessive prosthetic makeup work. We're told at the outset that the ship's crew totals 17, though regrettably the majority of these are severely underdeveloped and serve very little purpose other than to become the inevitable victims to both the imbalanced script and the various nasties that await. The film's opening does do a great job of setting up the intrigue and introducing the cast, while simultaneously impressing with a sense of wonderment and awe. However, once the ship sets down at its destination, the shortcomings and missteps very rapidly take over. Characters and plot bounce back and forth between the planet itself and the ship with little focus or direction. An abundance of plot elements or obstacles are introduced with little to no explanation or development, and before long there's so much being shown or introduced that the whole scenario begins to derail and lose any sense of context. The central crisis at hand seems to constantly shift and bandy around a number of different elements and issues. Is there a lethal contagion that must be contained? Or is it an alien-esque creature with a similar evolutionary cycle? Is there a secret agenda amongst the crew? How and why is a presumed dead crew member horribly mutated and causing mayhem in the cargo hold? Prometheus applies a flurry of ideas, questions and narrative strands like these with such pace and ferocity that as an audience it's easy to lose sight of where we are and where the film's headed, to the point where it seemingly devolves into a series of detached set pieces and encounters as opposed to any tangible dramatic arc or through line. The biggest problem amongst all of this is that generally speaking there's very little connection or investment with the characters going on this journey. There are some effective creature sequences, a particular highlight involving some forced surgery, but for all the impact these moments make they are isolated and forgotten as quickly as they are introduced. With the narrative shift in focus so frequently and the threats encountered so ephemeral and unpredictable, it moves Prometheus into territory where tension and drama are absent in favour of spectacle and shock factor. Credit should be given for the attempt at a broader and more ambitious movie than its predecessors, but in trying to do, show and tell so much it ultimately flounders and buckles under the anticipation of what could and should have been a far more tense, coherent and thrilling piece of cinema. For all of these flaws, there are some definite highlights, and unsurprisingly chief amongst them is the work of one of the most reliable and versatile actors working today, relative newcomer Michael Fassbender.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
As Android David, he puts in an expertly judged and deliciously ambiguous turn which results in both the character and performance being the most successful and lasting elements of the entire movie. Treading an uncanny balance between artificiality and something decidedly human yet detached, it's unfortunate in many ways that such a great character and performance is bogged down amongst all of the film's excesses and narrative wobbles, and falls prey to the schizophrenic writing. For instance, relatively early on, a key decision is made by the character with some extreme consequences. Yet as with much of the film, the fallout and trajectory of that particular plot point is generally forgotten in favour of the next complication, and regretfully is never truly revisited despite the great conflict and character drama that could have developed from it. Another saving grace for the film, though, is its remarkable aesthetic style and visual achievement. It's no exaggeration to label Prometheus as one of the most stunning and gorgeous science fiction films ever put to screen. Ridley Scott and his team have always been masters of perfecting a convincing, faultless vision on screen, even in his less successful films such as Kingdom of Heaven, and Prometheus is certainly no exception. some superb cinematography, inspired art direction and design work, and some generally excellent visual effects all culminate harmoniously to make a real opulent cinematic treat. In all, Prometheus is something of a difficult film to assess and pass judgment on. At its core, it's an overly busy, unsubtle and wavering jumble of ideas that, whilst executed well, fail to form a satisfying and coherent whole. It's beautifully shot and extraordinarily well crafted, yet for all of its splendour feels strangely empty. There are moments of visual fancy and creative horror, yet they lack any real gravity or lasting impact. It's more ambitious and reaches for a much broader pathos than most sci-fi, yet loses focus as a result. And finally, whilst it's clearly trying to be a very different beast and step out from the shadows of the Alien franchise, its knowing references and frequent fan service constantly draw unfavourable comparisons to that much more accomplished and effective piece of cinema. To call it an intriguing and beautiful mess is perhaps a little harsh, so instead it seems far more fitting to harken back to its main success, Michael Fassbender's android David. For, like him, Prometheus is a difficult to gauge, convincing yet somewhat soulless and detached feat of technical brilliance. We give it 3 stars.